My ex-wife drained my bank accounts, faked a pregnancy to extort me, and built a cult following online, until the FBI caught her live streaming from prison. They say hindsight is 20/20, but I never imagined I'd look back on my own life and see it as a cautionary tale. If you had asked me 5 years ago, I would have told you I was a man who made smart choices. I built my career with discipline, avoided unnecessary risks, and prided myself on reading people well. But all of that meant nothing when Olivia Bennett walked into my life. She was effortless in her charm, the kind of woman who made you lean in when she spoke. Her confidence was magnetic. She didn't just own a room. She commanded it. Olivia wasn't like the others I had dated before. She had ambition, a vision for her future, and more importantly, she made me feel like I was a part of something bigger than myself. We met at a mutual friend's networking event. She was launching a boutique brand that focused on sustainable fashion, or so she claimed. She spoke about it with so much passion that I couldn't help but believe in her dream. She wasn't looking for a handout, at least that's what I thought. She just needed a partner who understood her ambition. And somehow that partner became me. Things escalated quickly. Within a year we were married. First, I ignored the inconsistencies in her stories. The late-night phone calls she never explained, the fluctuating bank transactions, the vague business plans that never quite materialized. I chalked it up to the stress of starting a business. Love blinds you in ways you never expect. I invested, a lot. Rent for a studio, marketing, materials, networking events, every expense had a justification. "We're so close," she would say, her hands wrapped around my arm. "Just a little more, and we'll be set for life." I believed her. But Olivia never actually worked. She was always busy, always on her laptop, always making calls. Yet nothing ever came of it. Then came the shopping sprees. First, she framed them as business expenses. Networking outfits, industry parties, luxury branding. But when I saw her live streaming on social media, spinning in front of designer bags, calling herself a self-made entrepreneur while using my money, I knew something was wrong. The moment I confronted her, the mask slipped. "You liked feeling needed," she smirked. "I just gave you what you wanted." That night I stopped giving her money, and that's when things got worse. The shift was immediate. The warmth in her voice turned to ice. The affectionate glances became glares. It was like living with a stranger, a cruel imitation of the woman I once thought I knew. The house felt colder, not just in temperature but in atmosphere. Every shared space was now a war zone. Every conversation a battle laced with passive aggression or outright hostility. At first, she played the wounded victim. She walked around with a manufactured sadness, sighing dramatically whenever I entered the room. But when I refused to give in, the performance ended. Her resentment boiled over. Suddenly, I was the villain in her story. She hurled accusations at me. Selfish, ungrateful, incapable of understanding her sacrifices. She made sure I knew how much she had given up for me. But the truth was, I was the one who had given everything, and she had only taken. The night she finally exploded, she was screaming before I even understood what had set her off. Her voice rang through the house, shaking with fury. She demanded to know how I could betray her, how I could be so heartless after all she had done for me. When I didn't respond the way she wanted, the mask slipped completely. The tenderness she had once feigned was gone, replaced by cold calculation. Her words turned razor-sharp, slicing through any illusions I had left. I started digging. I combed through bank statements, emails, and receipts, piecing together a puzzle I didn't want to complete. The deeper I looked, the worse it became. Thousands of dollars had been siphoned away into a private account under a name I didn't recognize. Transactions disguised as business expenses were actually cash withdrawals. Olivia had been draining me dry, methodically and intentionally. She had been planning this for a long time. When I confronted her, I expected denial, some half-hearted excuse or crocodile tears. Instead, she laughed. A cold, mirthless sound. She looked at me like I was an idiot for taking this long to figure it out. "You're slow," she muttered, reaching for her purse. She didn't even try to justify it. She didn't have to. She knew she had won. "You can stop pretending to be the victim now. It's pathetic." And then, just like that, she walked out of my life. For a brief moment, I almost felt relief. But deep down, I knew better. Olivia never went quietly. First, there was silence. No texts, no calls, No sudden, dramatic reappearances. I should have been able to move on, to start rebuilding. But instead, an unsettling feeling crept in. Something wasn't right. Then came the letter. A bank notice about a loan application, one I had never submitted. My hands trembled as I logged into my accounts. The horror unfolded in real time. My credit cards maxed out. My savings gone. My retirement fund completely drained. The numbers didn't lie. $330,000 vanished overnight. My breath hitched. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. This wasn't just revenge. This was calculated annihilation. I called the bank, my voice barely steady. "This is fraud," I choked out, praying there was some mistake, some way to undo this. The woman on the other end hesitated. "Sir, these transactions were made from your verified devices." Her words landed like a punch to the gut. I had never changed my passwords. Olivia knew everything, my logins, my security questions, my most private details. She had been planning this for years, mapping out her escape while ensuring my downfall. She had bled me dry and left me for dead. But she wasn't done yet. Desperation led me to Adam Becker, a divorce attorney my brother had recommended. My hands trembled as I slid a folder of documents across his desk. I had spent the past few weeks drowning in Olivia's destruction. Maxed out accounts, ruined credit, and now, the looming battle of divorce. Adam barely glanced at the documents before shaking his head. "She's going to bleed you dry one way or another." His voice carried no sympathy, just a matter-of-fact certainty that made my stomach churn. He reached for a paperclip-bound document, flipped a few pages, then slid it across the desk toward me. I recognized it instantly, my prenuptial agreement. It was the same contract Olivia had fought tooth and nail against, calling it unromantic, a betrayal, and proof that I never truly loved her. She had pulled every emotional manipulation trick in the book. Crying, silent treatment, guilt trips, anything to get me to tear it up. But I had stood my ground. And now, it was the only thing standing between me and financial ruin. Adam smirked. "She's entitled to almost nothing." Relief surged through me, but I knew better than to relax. Olivia never accepted defeat. She wouldn't just walk away. We filed the divorce papers the next morning. The process should have been quick. My finances were already in ruins thanks to her. But the prenup ensured she couldn't legally claim anything else. It should have been over in a few weeks. But 2 weeks later, Olivia made her move. A court summons arrived in the mail, a thick envelope stamped with official markings. I tore it open, my stomach twisting as I read the words staring back at me. Petition for child support. My breath hitched, my vision blurred. I reread the letter at least 3 times, trying to make sense of it. Olivia was claiming that I was the father of a 2-month-old baby and that I had abandoned my responsibilities. I hadn't seen her in over a year. There was no way this baby was mine. A cold sweat broke out across my skin. My hands clenched the paper, crumpling the edges. This wasn't just a desperate attempt to squeeze more money out of me. This was calculated. Olivia had waited until the divorce was in motion, knowing she couldn't touch my assets, and then she pulled this. I drove straight to Adam's office, my thoughts racing. He skimmed the documents with a practiced detachment before exhaling sharply. "She's fishing," he muttered. "This is a classic move. She's banking on you panicking and settling out of court." My jaw clenched. Olivia had spent years manipulating me, convincing me to ignore red flags, making me believe she was something she wasn't. I had been blind before, but not this time. "We're not settling," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Adam nodded. "Good. First thing we do is demand a paternity test." The next few weeks were pure hell. The summons had done exactly what Olivia intended. It rattled me. I knew the baby couldn't be mine, but that didn't stop the what-ifs from creeping in. What if she had faked something? What if she had forged documents? What if she had found some way to trap me in this? She had access to my personal information for years. She knew my passwords, my security questions, my deepest vulnerabilities. I wouldn't put anything past her. The paranoia consumed me. I barely slept. Every phone call made my stomach lurch. Every new legal document felt like a new landmine waiting to explode beneath me. Then, Olivia started her public campaign. She took to social media, spinning her narrative to anyone who would listen. According to her, I was a deadbeat father who had left her and our child to struggle alone. She painted herself as the victim, The brave single mother fighting against an uncaring ex who refused to take responsibility. Her followers, most of whom had no idea who I really was, ate it up. The messages started pouring in. Hate mail, DMs filled with threats, strangers calling me a monster, my name dragged through the mud by people who had no clue what the truth was. The worst part? She looked so convincing. She wasn't ranting or playing the bitter ex. No, she was methodical. She played the role of the heartbroken mother with such precision that even I had to remind myself it was all an act. She had spent years perfecting the art of deception, and now, she was using it to destroy me. The court hearing loomed closer. The pressure built. I could feel the walls closing in. But I refused to break. Then, the night before the hearing, I received an anonymous email. Check the records. That was all it said. No sender. No explanation. Just 3 words that sent me spiraling down a rabbit hole I hadn't dared to explore before. I spent the entire night digging. Public records, financial documents, anything I could find. And when I finally did find it, my stomach dropped. There it was. A single line in a database buried under layers of bureaucracy. A birth certificate. The baby's birth date didn't match Olivia's timeline. She had lied. Again. The next morning, I walked into the courtroom, my heart pounding. Olivia was already there, sitting at the plaintiff's table, looking as composed as ever. She glanced up at me, and for the briefest moment, she smirked. The same smirk from the night she walked out of my life. The judge called the case. My lawyer stood, filing the request for a paternity test. Olivia froze, just for a fraction of a second. But I saw it. She hadn't expected me to fight back. She thought she could drown me in legal battles, pressure me into settling. But now she was trapped. The judge granted our request. As I left the courthouse, a strange sense of clarity washed over me. I didn't know what the test results would bring. I didn't know what other tricks Olivia had up her sleeve. But one thing was clear. This wasn't over yet. And this time I wasn't playing by her rules. When I arrived at the courthouse, she was already there. Flawless as ever. Her hair was styled perfectly. Her makeup expertly applied. Her tailored outfit a sharp contrast to the chaos she had left in my life. But the thing that sent a chill down my spine wasn't her calculated poise. It was the baby carrier beside her. For a brief moment, doubt crept into my mind. What if I was wrong? What if, against all logic, this child actually was mine? The thought squeezed my chest with an unbearable weight. But then Olivia lifted her gaze, and our eyes met. And she smirked. The same smirk from the day she walked out. The same smirk she wore when she drained my accounts. The same smirk when she sold my car and left me drowning in debt. The doubt evaporated. Adam wasted no time. The moment we were called forward, he pushed for an immediate paternity test. The judge approved, and Olivia barely reacted. That should have told me everything I needed to know. The wait for the results was excruciating. Every sleepless night, every second of paranoia, every lingering what if, it all culminated in that single sheet of paper. 0% probability. My hands clenched around the document as I stared at the words. I had prepared for this. I had known this was the likely outcome. And yet, seeing the confirmation sent a surge of relief through me so overwhelming that I had to steady myself. But relief didn't last long. Because just as I was processing this, something else happened. A man stepped forward. I got tested too, he said, his voice strained. And I am the father. His name was Marcus Evans. I didn't recognize him at first, but when I turned to look, I saw it. The exhaustion in his eyes. The deep lines of stress on his face. He wasn't just some random guy. He was another victim. The realization hit me like a truck. Olivia hadn't just pulled this scam on me. She had done this before. Adam exchanged a look with me, then with Marcus. It wasn't a coincidence that he was here. That night, I met with Marcus in Adam's office. I needed to know everything. Marcus told me how he had met Olivia while she was still married to me. How she had lied about everything, spinning a story about a controlling husband who had trapped her in a loveless marriage. How she had leaned on him, made him feel like her savior, convinced him to help her financially. She had done to him what she had done to me, and worse, she had been pregnant the entire time. Marcus's voice was hoarse when he said it. She told me she was starting a business. I gave her everything, thousands of dollars. And the whole time, she was still married to you. The weight of his words made my stomach churn. She had played us both. I needed answers. We needed answers. That's when Vincent Carter entered the picture. Vincent was a private investigator, one of the best, according to Adam. He was sharp, no nonsense, and had seen more scams than he could count. When we hired him, I had expected him to uncover a few forged documents, maybe some hidden accounts. I wasn't prepared for what he actually found. The depth of Olivia's deception was staggering. This wasn't just about draining bank accounts or manipulating men for financial gain. This was something far worse. Fraud, identity theft, and worse, kidnapping. Vincent laid out the evidence. Olivia had forged adoption papers. She had stolen a child. The baby, Liam Brooks, wasn't hers. My breath caught in my throat as the reality sank in. This entire thing wasn't just a desperate money grab. This was organized crime. The deeper we dug, the more horrifying the picture became. Olivia had a pattern. She had done this before, in different cities with different identities. Each time, she found a new man, spun a new web of lies, and when she was done, she left them in ruins. But this time, she had crossed a line even she couldn't manipulate her way out of. She had taken a child. I sat in Adam's office, staring at the folder of evidence Vincent had compiled. The pictures, the documents, the emails, the horrifying truth. Olivia had orchestrated this entire thing from the beginning. She had never been pregnant. Not with my child, not even with Marcus's. She had taken Liam from a woman named Sophia Reynolds, a mother who had been desperately searching for her missing son for months. Sophia had filed police reports. She had contacted agencies. But Olivia had covered her tracks so well that no one had connected the dots. Until now, I gripped the edge of the table, my knuckles white. Olivia had stolen everything from me. My money, my trust, my peace of mind. But this was something else entirely. She wasn't just a liar. She wasn't just a manipulator. She was a criminal. And now, finally, we had the proof to bring her down. When the authorities finally caught up with her, Olivia tried to run. She had spent her life slipping through the cracks, weaving elaborate lies, using charm as both a weapon and a shield. But this time there was no escape. The arrest happened in dramatic fashion. A high-speed chase, helicopters overhead, Olivia cornered in a cheap motel, desperately trying to book a flight under yet another stolen identity. But the net had already closed around her. The moment she stepped outside, she was surrounded. Red and blue flashing lights, officers shouting commands. It was over. Yet, even then, she refused to surrender with dignity. She screamed. She cried. She tried to charm her way out of it, playing the victim like she always had. But there was no one left to believe her lies. The courtroom was silent when Richard Montgomery, the judge overseeing her case, read out the charges. Wire fraud, identity theft, kidnapping. Each word felt heavier than the last. And when the final sentence was spoken, 20 years in federal prison, a hush fell over the room. For the first time, Olivia Bennett had run out of moves. But she wasn't done yet. Even behind bars, she found a way to manipulate. A smuggled phone, a live stream. She built a cult following of people who believed in her lies, who saw her not as a criminal but as a victim of a corrupt system. She crafted a narrative of injustice, portraying herself as a wronged woman, locked away by powerful men who wanted to silence her. And people bought it. Thousands of them. They donated money. They spread her story. They fueled her delusion. For a while, it seemed like she might actually rebuild from behind bars. Then the FBI raided her cell. Live. On TikTok. It happened fast. One moment, Olivia was mid-sentence, eyes glistening with well-rehearsed emotion, telling her audience about how she had been wrongfully imprisoned. The next, the screen shook violently. Voices barked commands. The camera spun. The last thing her followers saw was Olivia's face twisting in panic before the feed cut to black. And just like that, her empire crumbled. The damage Olivia left in my life didn't disappear overnight. It took years to rebuild what she had torn apart. The financial devastation was the easiest to quantify. The destroyed credit, the drained accounts, the legal fees. But the trust she shattered? That was something money couldn't fix. For the longest time, every interaction felt like a potential trap. Every smile from a stranger felt like the prelude to another deception. I kept my circle small. I hesitated before letting anyone in. Olivia had conditioned me to doubt, to second-guess everything and everyone. But slowly, I pieced myself back together. One decision at a time. I stopped looking over my shoulder. I stopped letting the shadow of Olivia dictate my choices. I moved forward, not just away from her, but toward something better. Now, when people talk about Olivia Bennet, they remember her as the woman who nearly got away with it all. But I remember her as something else entirely. A lesson I'll never forget. New update. The story didn't end, even after she was locked away. Marcus left the city. He couldn't bear the memories. This place where he had once loved a fraud, where he had been completely manipulated by her lies. As for me, I did what I should have done long ago. I changed my number, moved to a new place, erased every trace of Olivia from my life. After everything, I learned one thing. Even when you lose everything, you can still start over. I didn't find myself through wealth or status. I found myself in an abandoned classic car. Every evening, I worked tirelessly to restore it, bolt by bolt, layer by layer of paint. I wasn't fixing the car to escape my past. I was doing it to remind myself that anything can be rebuilt, even a life that had been shattered. One day, Sophia Reynolds knocked on my garage door. "I heard you're restoring a '69 Chevy Chevelle?" she asked, crossing her arms. I raised an eyebrow. "You know cars? Grew up in a repair shop with my dad." She shrugged. "Need an extra set of hands?" She didn't ask about my past. She didn't care about my money or the wreckage Olivia had left behind. She just loved cars, and that made me trust her in a way I didn't think was possible anymore. That night, after we finished installing the exhaust system, she patted my shoulder. "You don't seem like the kind of guy who lets the past break him," she said, raising her beer. I glanced at the car, then at her. "Maybe it just took me a while to figure that out," I admitted. I started the engine. The roar echoed through the garage, a deep, steady hum that vibrated through my chest. For the first time in years, I felt free. The story ends here, but the lesson remains. Life has a way of testing us, of throwing people like Olivia into our paths, people who manipulate, deceive, and take without remorse. But in the end, what defines us is not what they steal from us, but how we choose to rebuild. Trust is fragile. Betrayal is devastating. But resilience? That's unstoppable. What do you think? Have you ever encountered someone like Olivia? What lessons did you take from it? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear them. And if you found this story eye-opening, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned, because there's always another story waiting to be told.